Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's very intimate panel discussion about the intersection of gender and leadership on Villanova's campus as part of Get Woke on Women's Leadership Week, a collaboration between She's the First, Get Woke Nova, and McNulty Institute for Women's Leadership. My name is Elizabeth Pianucci. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am president of She's the First, and I am a leadership ambassador for the McNulty Institute. So tonight we'll be hearing from 6 change makers who are transforming Villanova's campus and also impacting the way leadership looks while doing so. We'll start with some prepared questions and then open it up for some Q&A if any of you have some questions as we go along. So I'd like to just say thank you to all the panelists for being here tonight. And just an FYI, we have one more panelist, Marilou Smith, joining us at 6:30, so she'll be coming in too. But we'll begin, so let's start this way. If you could just share your background as to who you are and what you do at Villanova, just to get us started.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Narda Quigley. My pronouns are also she, hers, hers, she, her, hers. I am in VSB. I'm a professor of management in the Department of Management and Operations. I've been at VSB since 2004. So, yeah, thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Gadsden, she, her, hers. I'm an assistant professor in public administration. I've been here since for 6 years. It's my 6th year. I'm also a member of the SARC team, the Sexual Assault Resource Coordinator team, as well as an IGR facilitator focusing on advanced race and gender and advanced race.
Hi everyone, my name is Victoria Nelson. I'm a senior here at Villanova studying political science and economics. I'm from the DC area. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Some things that I do on campus: I'm the president of the Association for Change and Transformation, also known as ACT on campus. We do the diversity skit, and I'm also a member of the Tazi chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
Hi, my name is Kelsey O'Donnell. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a PhD student in my 5th year here. I also did my master's here, so I've been here since 2015. Some things I do on campus is a lot with STEM outreach, so I work with the Vested program and Nova Edge, and
my name is Joe Citera, he, him, his pronouns. I'm the assistant director for student involvement, so a few things that I do. I serve as the advisor for the Senate within student government, as well as the campus activities team. I'm chair of the VU Seniors Committee, which provides a lot of the senior programming on campus. I also serve as a facilitator in the IGR program. Specifically, I've done the race section. I've also done a section on masculinity. So, perfect timing.
Yeah. How about that? Hi. Okay.
just
My turn?
Introduction.
Yeah.
I run around. Is this like a cute note for us? Welcome. Hi, I'm Marilou Smith. I work in facilities. I'm a senior project manager at Villanova. I have been here for 23 years. I went to Villanova, graduated in 1984, a very long time ago. Doesn't seem that long for me, but I'm sure if I say it to you guys, it sounds very, very long ago. I'm a Villanova family. I have, my father went here, my grandfather went here, my brothers went here. I have 4 sons, 3 of them went here, and I went here. My husband did not. Kind of a little bit of a problem, but I think he's a wannabe Villanova now. So I have a long history of Villanova. I love the place, and I run construction projects. So I graduated as an electrical engineer here in 1984. I was one of 7 women in the engineering department, in actually the electrical engineering department, and I think there might have been 76 graduates from that class. So again, this is probably, you know, I'm in a very male-dominated industry way back when. So, and I've just finished, my biggest project right now is working on Lancaster Avenue. I was fortunate enough to be a part of that project and start it from the beginning until the completion. So my last part of finishing off the CICD of Lancaster Avenue is the Performing Arts Center. which we will be opening in the spring of 2020.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. The next question is what our whole night is centered around. So if we could just hear, how does gender impact your leadership experience at Villanova? So I want to hear from everybody. I don't know if you want to start again this way, or if there's somebody who wants to go first.
I guess I'll go.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned earlier, I'm a leader in terms of ACT, and so ACT does a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion work here on campus, not beyond the diversity skit. And something that I've found in how my gender impacts my leadership here is that, specifically being a woman and being a woman of color, I am asked to do a lot of work on the campus in terms of improving campus climate and improving, giving workshops about different things or providing facilitators to different organizations. And I love doing the work, and I'm happy I am doing the work, but I feel like sometimes the responsibility falls on women of color on this campus to do all of that work, which I'm happy to do it, but I will say that I am pretty exhausted in my senior year after doing it this is my 4th year doing it. So that's my experience with how my gender has impacted me, but for me, gender and race are inextricably linked for me. Yeah.
Also feel free to build on each other, but.
Yeah, I guess, so some things that I do that are have influence on Villanova's campus, but I'm a chemical engineer by training. So my field as well is very male dominated. I guess in terms of the engineering, we do have a little more females. So I'm looking into pharmaceuticals and some groups I'm involved with. Similarly, I was leading a graduate student group, and just the way that, you're the female, why don't you plan the happy hour? Or you plan the social? Obviously, like, everybody loves planning a happy hour or social event, but just by default, because I was one of the females on the board and then I started to run the group, it was, why don't you do the social things? It's like, okay, well, what about bringing in people from different corporations or talking to people about different job opportunities? It said, that was defaulted to some of the guys leading the group versus me. So that was some things, and actually an event that I had here, which is, obviously I favored Villanova to have the event, was like one of the first times I was able to be fully recognized for an event that I threw, was my idea, and it was this big shock to everybody else. So just kind of, again, at least being a female, a lot of things got defaulted because of being a female sometimes.
So maybe I'll pivot off that a little bit. So as part of the management department, part of my role in the management department is to teach classes on leadership. And so I'm always thinking about this sort of connection between gender and leadership. And I guess my sort of personal observation that came when I thought about Liz's question was, I think I've been somewhat lucky in that my default leadership style has really been very consistent with the gender role expectations. So I tend to, I don't know this for sure, but this is what I try to do. Like, I try to be sort of collaborative and teamy and that kind of thing in my leadership style. I was department chair for 6 years, and it was sort of the approach that I took there. But I think it's made things a lot easier for me, that's consistent with my personality, but also sort of consistent with what everyone is expecting of women leaders, especially on this campus. I'm not a rabble-rouser, I wish I were, but I tend to be a little bit more sort of restrained than that. But speaking to what you both are saying, it's what are the expectations associated with being female on this campus, and sort of how do we make our way in this and be successful as leaders, in those roles. And to me, and I hear you both saying this as well, like, we are sort of conforming to the expectations associated with what our gender is sort of expected to do in leadership. So it's, yeah.
So to tag on to you, I have been in, I was in a male-dominated degree. I grew up with 8 brothers and a sister. I have 4 sons. I work in a male-dominated industry. I've never, I don't have those same situations. Like, so when I'm out on a job, I'm not that intimidated. I may have been earlier one, but I don't know if I was actually intimidated by males or just the fact that I didn't know anything at the time. Because I never looked at myself as something other than I can do whatever I want, because that's what my father told me I could do. Like, you know, whatever you set your mind to, you do that. So I was taught with all those brothers, you know, set a goal and that's what you work toward. So I have been fortunate in that situation. Now, there's a possibility that I may have been passed up or something like that as a result because I'm a woman, but I'm not sure that I actually took it for that or if I took it because I didn't think I was ready for that. I see in just my last 10 years of working here and being in a leadership role more so now than, you know, the previous 20 years, that it actually works sort of in my benefit as a woman because I'm one of, you know, very few. So I stand out there in the field. There's a lot of, like I was telling a friend of mine that there's a few guys out in the field that they'll be, you know, hey, I know you. And you're like, you know, hi, I say hi to these guys all the time. And they're like, you're the boss lady. And I'm like, you know, I don't see myself as that. But the way I look at things is that it's just a team of people. And the idea is here's the end of the race. And I got to get to that goal line. And like you said, collaboratively, I think that's kind of how you know, how my management style is not necessarily always to be right, but to work together to get to the finish line. So I'm sure, and for sure, in my early years of graduating from college, I definitely was treated like, oh, she's a woman and she's gonna quit, she's gonna have children, you know, those kind of things. But I think because I never did that, like, that stopped being an obstacle for me, you know. And I see today that that's not usually that much of a problem anymore. I don't see bosses doing that, at least at Villanova. I don't see them doing that to our young women in our department. So that's just my experience, and again, I'm limited because I've been here, and I manage people from the outside, so.
As the only person who identifies as a man on stage, I think, like, for me, it's harder sometimes to see my leadership experience and how, like, that might intersect with my gender. I think because in so many ways it's very normative, I think, in terms of our culture. So for me to articulate specifically where that might, like, I can identify that is sometimes difficult, right? But hearing some things that I heard on stage, I think you referenced how you were automatically, like, told that, or, like, assumed that you would be planning something or things like that. Like, I see that in my role in my colleagues and how I'm never asked to do that, right? And I think, like, something that happened recently, and I'm noticing these things more and more as I'm trying to educate myself, but where in a meeting, people will assume that I made a point that was a good point, when it was really someone else and who was a woman in the room who made the point. And I do my best to address that when appropriate, and be like, oh, no, I didn't bring that point up, actually, that was this person. But I see that there's an automatic assumption, right, that Joe made that point. Is that because he's a man? Yeah, probably that's the assumption that's being, at least to my eyes, that might be it. So that happens a lot. In terms of, though, not just, like, how I experience it, but, like, what does it mean for me and how I lead? I think, like, student affairs, I'm in student life. Student affairs is not overwhelmingly more women in it, but there definitely are more women in student affairs than there are men. And I think that it's really important for me to be conscious of how I carry myself as a man, given my identity, especially on this campus, as a white man, Catholic, in terms of how I present myself, how I carry myself, and what kind of example I can be for also other men. So, yeah.
And I guess to really just bring together or connect to everything that has already been said, similar to Victoria, I also have a strong connection between my race and my gender here on campus, and I relate to the care work that's required of women of color or assumed that women of color will do here on the campus, and the emotional labor that we do as well. So I have, in addition to that intersection, I also have an intersection of being a woman and also being a junior faculty member. And that's something else that I struggle with in terms of, you know, being asked to do sometimes more administrative tasks, planning tasks, etc. And I learned early on to say no, right, to say no. What that's done for me, though, is kind of giving me, some folks find me less approachable because of that. Because if someone says, oh, hey, you know, Danielle or Dr. Gadsden, can you, you know, plan this, this, and that? I'll say, no, I can't. I don't have time, right? So, and let no be a complete sentence. And so for some people, right, that's seen as not being collaborative or what have you. But again, I'm not the only person that's able to do that task. So probably leading into one of the future questions that you're going to ask, you know, when I think about my leadership, I try to do those things. I prioritize those things that I think I can bring value to based on who I am and what my particular perception or perspective might be, right? If anyone can plan the social hour, I don't have to be the person to do it, right? If anyone can make the copies, I don't have to make the copies, right? It could be me, it could be so, and we can all take turns, right? We can all take turns and do it in that kind of equitable way, but I'm not the first person. Why are you coming to me first? And I challenge people with that. And then eventually they stop asking me.
I mean, I think on top of that, like, so that was kind of when I got involved with the group, was the whole no thing. So it started to be, I learned to be a little more assertive. But again, to me, it's assertive. To some of the other people, it's aggressive.
Yes. Yep.
So I'm a graduate student, like I said. So I have undergrads that work in our lab. So I'm the most senior person in the lab, so technically we have 2 full-time PhD students, one that kind of shares our lab, 2 other master's students, and about 5 undergrad students. And my advisor is the chair of the department, so she's got her hands full, so I'm usually the first look. If it's really, really dire, they go to her. And you know, when people walk in the lab, it's a lab, there's chemicals, there's safety hazards, and I'm a very forward person to be in with. But you know, there's things you can harm yourself with. There's safety gear you have to do. If you break something, clean it up. Things that should be known, but not everybody knows them, and I just state them very forwardly. And I've had some people come up to me and say, why are you so aggressive? Why are you so aggressive? It's like, well, first off, you could literally burn your skin off in here. Like, that's a concern. Mm-hmm. I don't want to take you to, like, the nurse's office or I almost said infirmary, but I don't think that's the right word either. But it's more of like, rather than being assertive in your leadership style, it's seen as aggressive. Yeah. And just, I mean, I've always thought that was something I've been struggling with, and I've tried to, like you said, now it's a sentence, and being secure in that too is something I've been trying to learn too.
Yeah, I think to go off of these like notions of like you had to grow into that role, it does segue right into my next question of, if it has over time, how has your view of leadership changed in regards like how you view yourself or how you view other leaders from whatever lens or perspective you choose?
So I guess I'll start again. So one of the things that I found...
A true leader.
So one of the things that I found particularly challenging is that I generally came from a background where I didn't really have to step up and do some of the work that I'm doing now because it was normalized diversity, equity, inclusion was, while there were issues with where I came from, but it was much more normalized than it is here. So I found myself working extra hard and doing all of these different things that I'm asked to do, because if I feel like if I don't do it, who else will? And so that feeling that, you know, well, I have to do this because I'm the only person that can do this and no one else is going to step up. So, and I mean, sometimes that sentiment is true because sometimes I haven't done things and then it just isn't done. So thinking about, so something that I'm growing into this year is taking that step back and saying, you know, am I okay to do this? Am I taking on too much of a toll on myself to keep doing these things? Or do I need to start training other leaders to be able to pick up the slack and do the work? So that's something that I've been working through this year. Saying no is something that I really am not good at. But yeah, I'm working on it. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I kind of gave my one part, but I think too, as you're saying, like training other leaders, I am praying I graduate in May, so I'm trying to just put, or to help people who are assuming the roles I did and trying to help them succeed in those roles, so that I can slowly just back away. It's also a timing thing, but also I think too, it's as much as it takes to step up, it also is enough to let people succeed on their own or make their mistakes within reason so that they can lead and learn the leadership that I was able to learn here. So I think that's something that's been able to change. And also, I mean, I try to gear towards other females and just how they can work through different situations, and also just different males who feel like they have to sometimes tiptoe around certain issues, and just saying, you know, like, this is okay and this is what you can do to help him or her. And I think that's something else too.
For me, it's like two things. I think in terms of like leadership and other leaders, like seeing, I'm talking from like an administrative perspective, there's a lot of tensions that exist, I think, for all leaders on campus to balance social justice, equity, inclusion with all of the other things that happen at the university. And as I've gotten older and I'm seeing more people in leadership positions have to navigate those tensions, I recognize it's not as easy as just like a tweet, right? And I'm respecting, like, there's a lot at stake there, right? Like, people have these jobs and they have families, and challenging something might put that in jeopardy. And I'm realizing more and more of, like, you have to be really strategic as a, like, in your leadership position. You have to pick the battles that are appropriate, that make sense, and you have to really navigate that scene, because if you want to change from the inside, that's what you have to do. And then in terms of me as like an advisor to student leaders, I'm realizing how like important like pedagogy and framing like these spaces are for our students. I see a lot, and this is natural. I think like it's really easy for me as a man who likes some stereotypically masculine things, right? Like to develop a relationship with a student around that, right? But how is that being unfair to other student leaders who might not share those things, right? So creating space for those leaders to also like be able to form those bonds and those relationships and is really important as well. So, yeah.
So I feel like as a leader that it's important to have a relationship with the people that you're working with. But I think it's really important to recognize what their strengths are and to try to use them for the strengths that they have, because you can have a team of 4 or 5 people and no one is the same, whether it's race, gender, intelligent level, like there's just all differences. And, you know, a lot of times we go through this, and, you know, some of the people that I work with, you know, are challenging, and not necessarily Villanova people, because I work with a lot of people outside. And I feel like as a leader, you have to find what they are good at. Like you're dealt with these people, people to work with, and you got to make it work. So like when you find out that this is just my world, a guy is good at doors, you put him on doors, you don't put him on walls. Like, and that's just a simple version. I'm not, or a guy that is a great communicator. Like I don't want him in the electrical room. I want him like directing the group and trying to help that. So I think as a leader, you have to see all that and try to strategically, play that game of chess.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. Plus, we do live in it's just a different time now, which is a great time, and it's everyone is growing and kind of trying so hard to be inclusive and seeing people for what they are good for and not, So I think that's what really a good leader is, and I see that really growing here at Villanova and being better. I mean, people are aware of it. Are people perfect at it? No, but they're aware, and that is like half the battle, I think.
And to add on to those two pieces, I think it's important to also understand yourself, right? As well as understanding the folks that you're working with and that work for you as well. One thing that I've been realizing about myself is that I know myself best, right? And that sounds like really cliche, but I literally was thinking about this last week, that for almost 4 decades, I have been living with me, right, and knowing me, right, and knowing how I react to things and what I'm good at, what I know and what I don't know, right? So having equal confidence, and yeah, I know that, right? I'm comfortable with that, but also I know nothing about that, and I want to learn more. So that once I realize I'm trying to be more in tune with knowing who I am, right, and knowing what my strengths are, I'm more comfortable making decisions and saying no and, deciding what it is, how I want to spend my time based on that, right? Based on this is something that I can really contribute to or not, right? And this is in a way that I can be helpful or not, and being okay with that, right? And being okay with that. And part of that is understanding me and my own strengths. And no one, not even your parents, no one knows you more than you know you.
I love this comment, and actually, it's great. It's just such a nice way to pull some of these different ideas together. And as all of you were talking, I was thinking in my crazy way of like the next leadership model that I'm going to write about. And so now I'm like, okay, I need to look into this and see if it's there. But I feel like there should be something about like a step up, step back model of leadership, where you're sort of thinking about your own life and your own priorities and your own strategy, kind of thinking about what's going on in your life at what time, and is it the right time for you to step in and lead, or is it the right time for you to step back and not lead? In my own life, I can tell you that I really enjoyed being department chair. It was the hardest leadership position I've ever encountered. I learned a ton. But I just reached a point where I have 2 little kids, they're 7 and 4, and I'm just spending like ridiculous hours working. Like I'd come home and try to spend my waking hours with the kids, and then as soon as they were asleep, I'd like whip out my laptop and be like, what emails do I need to, it was unsustainable. So at a certain point, I just had to be like, if I want my sanity and my health, I'm not that old, and I don't want to start having, well, I'm getting older every minute, but anyway, like we all are. Right? Like, I don't want to have like health problems before I should, because I'm like putting so much effort into this. So I love what I do, and like similar to what you were saying, like there are times when you feel like nobody's going to do the thing that you see that needs to be done, but also like you got to be strategic about it, and you have to think about knowing yourself and are you the person to do that at that time? Step up, step back.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I think to go along with those, I feel like they pair well together with like something I'm working on discovering is like delegating and being like comfortable doing that, and also like trusting who you're delegating to.
Yes.
And I think that's something that like I've just learned throughout like leadership roles. That's the only way to like stay sane and like enjoy your role too, while not just like spreading too thin. So the next one might spin off. I hope it spins off into other things, because I think it's a question that is being discussed at Villanova more and more, maybe not enough. So without further ado, from an equity perspective on all ranges, what would you say has changed at Villanova in your time here, whether it's just your undergrad like Victoria or many other years, and what do you want to see change in years to come from, again, an equity perspective, whether that's race, gender, socioeconomic status?
I'm going to step back.
I can start in thinking a little bit about, I've found that my experience at Villanova has been very segregated. So very rarely am I in a scenario where there's a good mix of male, female, people of color, non-people of color, right? So there's usually like a majority, right? Like it's usually like this, right? Where here we have one person that identifies as male on the panel, right? Yeah. And again, that might be by design, but very often that's how things in the circles that I participate in at Villanova, it tends to be that way. That I'm in a setting where most of the people might be, if I'm working with IGR, committees, that there's quite a few people of color, and then I go back to my department and I'm the only person of color, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very stark in that way. So there's a lot of switching that I have to do, right? Depending on who's in the room and how I'm presenting myself, etc. So I would say that I think Villanova is doing better with representation from my perspective as a junior faculty member. I'm not as familiar with the undergraduate experience and kind of how we're doing in terms of demographics, but in terms of being a professor, there are more professors now that look like me than there were 6 years ago and 12 years ago when I graduated with a master's degree. So representation is getting better. But equity and inclusiveness, I think we still have some work to do.
Maybe I'll jump in and just say a couple of things. I feel like there's been a really positive trajectory at the university since 2004. Part of that has to do, I think, with university leadership at the highest levels. I just have often been impressed by Father Peter's very positive messaging around diversity, equity, and inclusion issues in response to things like current events and those kinds of things. So he's like sending a very clear message, for example, like the immigrant crisis, like all of those kinds of things. We're hearing from him in a timely fashion, and his words hold a lot of weight, right? Because he's this like legitimate representative of the Catholic Church and of the Augustinian institution. So, not to mention of Villanova University. So there's very definite positive change, and I think hearts and minds are sort of in the right place at the top of the institution. I also feel like, and this is really exciting for me in the 15 years I've been here, students are so much more active and interested and clued in about these issues. So now we have organizations like Get Woke and the work that McNulty is doing, She's the First. I mean, there are lots of different organizations on campus that I think students can affiliate with. So we have like the very top and sort of like the student level. And so then I think what we need to do is work on movement in between. We need a lot of work at the faculty level. I'm less sure about sort of the staff level because I don't know that area as well, but there's sort of, I guess the way I would look at it is that there's a bell curve of faculty, and there's a solid group, I think, in that, maybe top, 10% who really care about DEI issues. Then you have this middle group that are like, is it really relevant for me? I don't know. They could be convinced if we make like a good argument and if we pull them over. And then there's the tail end, which I'm just not sure we're ever going to affect. But I think there's a lot of potential to kind of get that middle moving in the right direction with the rest of the university, and I think that's where we're going to start seeing the inclusion stuff coming in.
I agree.
Just, maybe to go off that ask, I know like we're definitely moving in that direction, but maybe do you have like any suggestions on like how you think that would happen, like that middle of that bell curve, like efforts? Do you think that has to be student-based, or do you think that comes from the top, or?
So I will tell you one exciting piece of news, which is part of, so Villanova last year was awarded an NSF Advance grant for institutional transformation and change. One thrust of that grant has been, so the grant itself is sort of centering on women and minorities in STEM fields and sort of just making that atmosphere better for them at Villanova. But the broader sort of purposes of what the group who got the grant is working on, we are working on developing training for faculty and sort of rolling out more opportunities for our faculty to get involved in this. I think the trick is like we need to figure out how we're going to motivate that middle of the bell curve, people who like may be interested once they learn a little bit more about why it's important, but we have to somehow figure out how to motivate them. But I think it's a great question. I don't think it's just certainly students can't just do this. They need higher support.
So I kind of think that I would have said 2006, but only since Father Peter has come in, I have seen a drastic change. I mean, clearly, you know, there's other men in my department, and I was given the job to run a very large construction project, not because I don't know why. I don't know if it was because I was a woman but I was given that opportunity, which is a great opportunity. It's a super large job, and I've always been treated. It's been a slow growth, but I have been treated better every year as they have more confidence that I'm doing my job. Yeah. And I don't fault anyone on that. Like that's just how we're used to, right? I mean, I went to school here, and I had a math teacher that said I was wasting my parents, not my parents, my father's money, which was like, well, and actually my father came in to have a conversation with that guy. It was about studying engineering, and here we are talking about STEM and like women, and really I think the way that this gets even better is if the varsity brings the JV in, which would be all the students, and kind of celebrates them and encourages them into this. So, if you have student engineers that are women, like let's put them on magazines. Let's, encourage them to be in this field. This is a field that there are very few women in. And it's not because they're not capable, it's because it's not encouraged. And I think that, I see obviously us making that push, but I'd like to see the push more, with faculty and celebrating those kids instead of us celebrating me or faculty. Like, let's celebrate the kids that are young, that we want to encourage them to do these things.
I just want to go back to your earlier comment before about how the change you've seen a lot, like from the top down, which has been great. But I think that we owe a lot of credit to Dr. Nance, who is behind a lot of those messages that Father Peter is sending out. So I just wanted to note that. And then also, in my time here, this is my 4th year, I've seen a lot of changes happen. Like the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion has doubled from 1 to 2. But that's still not enough for an entire university, in my personal opinion. So that's one of the things that I see improving in the future, is that office growing. And as we've seen CASA grow and Office of Intercultural Affairs grow, it's great, and it's reflecting the changes that the university is having in demographics. So I think that that's great. I know anecdotally, some of my friends were looking at the incoming class of students. We're like, wow, it's so diverse, and compared to what we had when we were coming in. So I think I definitely see that improvement as well. But I think a lot of the changes come from the bottom up in terms of student activism on campus, and a lot of students have been behind these pushes to make the university better. And I am confident in saying that once I graduate here, I know that I'm leaving it better than I got here. And so I think that that's something that I'm taking with me, that even though like the day-to-day and the things that I've experienced through over the years have been bad, I know that in the future, hopefully as the next students keep pushing it to keep moving forward, that it'll keep getting better for other students.
Yeah, going off actually what Victoria just said, in my 4 years here, I watched the CMA, the Center for Multicultural Affairs, turn into like 3 different offices, right? So institutionally, and that's CASA, DE&I, and Intercultural Affairs within student life. So I think from an institutional perspective, there's a commitment, right? And it's visible, like there's touch points. I also study like higher ed, so I understand that in higher ed, like we operate in like loosely coupled systems for like organizational management. I'm sure you're like, yeah, but like things don't like, it takes a long time for like these things to make an impact on a campus because they're so like, we like work in silos. And I think there's like really intentional efforts that are being made to like squash that, right? There's so much outreach by Dr. Nance's office. IGR is something that really tries to transcend not just like little silos, but like tries to, does so much professional development work around the campus, not just for students, but for like staff and faculty as well. So like there are a ton of institutional efforts, but one thing I'd love to see more of is, I think like student life, I don't mean like maybe necessarily like the division of student life, but that too, but also like student life, like students. I advise student government, and there's a ton of activism going on campus, and I'm the first person to tell student government, like, you're not the ones doing it. And and that's problematic. So I think they're aware of that, right? But it was really funny because last year there were a bunch of candidates who were running for president of the like student government and student body. And one candidate was running on that if she were to be elected, she'd be the first woman president in student government's history. I didn't know if that was necessarily true. Apparently it wasn't, but the fact that we had to verify that with someone who has worked at the university for 30 years, I think shows that that's problematic. And I don't think anyone could have said if there was a person of color who's been president. So coming from a university that wasn't a situation, like why would, yeah, it's just been something that's a little frustrating. I want to see students be able to elect someone, or even like create an organization and create an atmosphere where someone feels like they could even potentially run for that position is something that's huge. So, yeah.
So I kind of live in this bubble of chemical engineering. And I went to a small Catholic school. I went to Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. So similar makeup, a lot smaller than Villanova. Like it took me 10 minutes to walk across campus at like on a long day. So I mean, coming, and then I worked for a little bit and then went back into education and academia. So coming to Villanova and going into my 5th year here, like the awareness on the campus here is something I did not experience as an undergrad. And I graduated in 2014. So I think that's saying a lot in the span of 5 years, just in academia in general, what the awareness is and what people are talking about and the conversations they're having. As far as what I'd like to see, again, like I'm just speaking from my own department and my own experiences, is, I mean, one big thing that came up this morning was seeing more female professors, which I mean, I think that the NSF grant's huge for that. And I think supporting the view of like female professors in big leadership roles is really important, because I know the college, and it's amazing that they like to put their statistics out and they like to show that. And I think I actually saw this, like it was one of the stories on the Get Woke Instagram. But you know, no, and that's awesome that they want us, that they are advertising or showing their statistic for how many female engineers they have, and that's amazing. But it shouldn't be just a number. It should be more than that, and it should be the way that females are integrated from all levels into the College of Engineering. And I think it was once I got involved with a lot of the outreach. So I sit on a committee through the college for outreach and all the outreach that goes on, where all the funding goes to, what kind of activities there are. And then also the two groups I work with are with minority students, first generation students coming out of high school, different areas, and what they view engineering as and what engineering is. So I think a big thing from these high school students that I think can be implemented at Villanova is just what engineering is and how that can include everybody, and how they can see that and visualize that. And it shouldn't be just because somebody believes a certain thing or looks a certain way that they necessarily should be appointed in those positions or feel like they have to take those roles, but just giving people those opportunities and welcoming people into those roles as they are qualified and as they are ready to take those roles for themselves too. So I think just back to what everybody else has been saying, a lot of the equity and inclusion in general, but so that younger students can see that, and really I think that shapes people more than people give credit to. So.
I think in my perspective, something I wish to see is that I think right now I love that we're having these conversations and moving toward this direction, but I think from my perspective at least, it's very much in silos. So you can go into a space where everybody's extremely passionate about these things and it's everyday conversation, and then you can move somewhere else on campus and equity and inclusion it's not even in the room. And I think there's a lot of work starting to be done on that, and the ball is getting rolling, but I think that's where Villanova has to go. I wish it would be the culture of Villanova as a whole, not just of student groups and some classes on campus that care about it. It needs to be a university. You come here, and rather than when you say go to Villanova, you hear ooh, Villanova, you hear that. That's would be my goal for Villanova, I guess. Yeah.
Which speaks directly to Dr. Nance's work again. That's what she is trying to do to get us on the same page about that. So I'm glad you brought that up.
So lastly, I guess you're all very inspirational people. I mean, we picked you for this reason. When I heard about all of your work, some I knew personally, some not. I think you all have such an important perspective to share. So just from your own experience, whether it be through leadership, allyship, or your specific educational discipline, what is some advice that you can share? I know I could learn from all of you, and I'm sure everybody can.
Well, I always take the opportunity to talk about allyship whenever I can and kind of jump in. And so I want to connect back to Joe's example of talking to student government. And Joe is such a strong ally and provides such great support for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives on campus. And that's a perfect example. Allyship, first of all, is a verb. It's something that we do. It's something active that's being done. And I really want to highlight the need to perform allyship within the circles that you are a part of, right? And so I'll infer, I don't know the makeup of student government, but based on the discussion, it seems it's majority white male, I would assume.
It's majority white. I'd say 50-50 in terms of that. But president,
right?
Always man.
Okay. So the president, right? So being able to talk to similar demographics, right, to you is important about what are you doing, right? So kind of pushing, what needs to be done from that perspective to individuals that you're connected to, and where your privilege can help push some of those agendas. That's the best way to be an ally. Yes, it is helpful to be able to, attend events for Black Student Union. I don't know what we call it here at Villanova, right? And to be there and support as well. But that doesn't make you an ally, right? That doesn't make you an ally. Just showing up, just sitting there, wearing a button, liking a tweet or whatever, right? That it's an action. It's something that you need to do, and you need to work allyship from your place of privilege, right?
I guess my advice would be echoing something that you said earlier in terms of take care of yourself first. You can't give to others if you're not giving to yourself. So something that I do is that, I'm inundated with all of these news stories and class discussions, panel discussions, and things like that. But I have something that distracts me. So I'm a huge fan of crime TV. I love Law and Order SVU. So that's like my favorite. So it's fine for me. It's find something that is a distraction, and don't feel bad about that. The stuff that we do, the work that you do is labor, and it's emotional labor, and you have to make sure that you take care of yourself and don't feel guilty about it.
So I think something that we talk about a lot at Villanova is servant leadership. I struggle sometimes going back and forth with using that language. I think it places an unfair burden on certain people. But I think, speaking from my perspective as a white man, I think it's really important to recognize that allyship, going off that, actually does mean that there is some sort of sacrifice there, that you are actually going to be giving something up, and whether that's unearned privilege or a relationship or an advancement or something like that. And I think that's something that's really important to be able to know and recognize that is, like you were saying, it's active, right? So I think that's a piece of advice, is recognizing what your privilege is and using it, and recognizing also that it's going to be a sacrifice. It's not easy to be an ally. It's not a tweet. It's more than that. Yeah. So you might be labeled the person who's annoying in the room or loud, or yeah.
That's okay.
I guess one thing that I always think about in the literature on climate for inclusion and diversity and equity, I think this comes up a lot, is just that it's really important to keep learning and to keep asking questions and to keep trying to educate yourself about issues. And I'm always trying to tell my class without being you have to learn, but ways to do that, of course you can do that in a formal classroom setting, and that's what we're here doing, but the learning that you do sort of by speaking with your friends and by learning about different perspectives and sort of where they come from and what their lives are like and what challenges they've had in their lives, those kinds of things. You can't beat that kind of learning. And if you feel like you don't have people in your friend group who you're comfortable with asking those questions of, or who you could learn from, reading is so good. I like reading novels specifically about other people's experiences, international authors, people in this country who just come from different backgrounds. You learn so much about what people's experiences are by simply reading other people's stories, right? Movies are good too, although Hollywood just has such a very specific story that they like to tell all the time. So I say international, foreign films, those kinds of things, or independent movies are always good ways to open your eyes and see things through a different perspective. But that's part of what, when I think about how are we going to get that middle set of faculty to care about this stuff, a lot of it is it could be through the one book, right? I remember Brian Stevenson's book opened up a lot of people's eyes because he just talked about issues so compellingly with data and personal experience. Those kinds of opportunities for our faculty and for our students are going to be really important in kind of moving the cultural needle towards a more inclusive space.
I feel like you've all covered it so well that I would only be saying ditto, ditto, ditto. That before I heard these three eloquently say what they had to say, I felt like I couldn't even, say anything. But, I mean, what I would have said originally would have just been that you just have to stay current and you have to listen and learn from your mistakes and learn from others and, talk to people. You really have to talk to different types of people too, not just your best friend, and you have to listen and see what people, people do every day. So that would be my only advice, is to just listen and learn from what you hear.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in the same boat because I'm going last. But but I think one thing too, and I did another panel like this in a VSB, and it was, I mean, you guys might know what the program is. You high school students who got accepted like come for the summer and they work on courses and. Yes, maybe. It was a fancy acronym. That's a lot of this campus. So I was talking to some of them, some of the students there, and a lot of them were VSB, but some were science majors, so biology, chemistry. I was a biochemistry undergrad, and I had one girl, we were just standing at this table, and it's one of those weird moments when you're in this like room full of people, but you feel like it's just you and this one other person for a second. And she was asking me, she said, I'm really nervous about being a female engineer. And it just like hit me so hard that like that was a concern of hers. And I think like the only thing I could tell her was like, you just have to own it, and you just have to be honest with yourself, and just like very self-aware, like everybody else has said it beautifully, but just to be very like self-aware and secure in yourself, but to just own what you know and own what you don't know too. And I think just having to tell somebody that and thinking like, I'm only 28, so it kind of baffled me that somebody who's 17 or 18, and I feel like I'm not that much older than her, but just to be able to say that to somebody else, it just like was such a moment. And so I think just like owning things and owning yourself most importantly is really important.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much. That's all the questions I had, and I couldn't have asked for better answers and panelists. If anybody in the audience has any questions, if at all. If not, it's okay too. But.
I had a question, especially for those of you who have children, how have you managed to have a work-life balance?
I'm still working on it.
I'm just laughing. I'm like, oh my.
You can start.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't know. So I grew up, my mom worked, so like there was never a thought in my mind that I wasn't going to work. And like I saw my mom going through, my parents happened to be academics, so I saw her like going through the tenure process and all that stuff. It was really hard. But, you know, I never felt like she didn't have time for me when I needed time with her and that kind of thing. So I guess I just thought it was never like a question that I was going to struggle with the work-family thing, and that I'm not sure the word, like balance is just such a silly word. I think what I would say is that I always feel like I'm just not doing things well enough. Like, I don't know how else to put it. It's like you always feel like you need to spend more time doing, like being with your kids or doing work. And so then in my like more rational moments, I'm like, I think it's okay. Like I think I'm not completely failing at everything. But there are these moments where you're just like, I'm doing a lot and I'm carrying a lot. And I think we just have to be gentle with ourselves with it. Like, I think I'm probably my own worst critic here. And sometimes I'll talk to my mom about it and she'll be like, you're doing fine, it's okay, don't worry. But it's a struggle. Like, and I think part of it is that our society is just not set up to have two working parents. It just isn't. No matter what empowering book you're reading about it or whatever, you know, sort of the flavor of the day discussion is on this, it's hard. And I think until we have more reasonable gender role expectations, it's going to continue to be that way. There are so many MBA students who, like, I always find this discussion funny, but they're like, you know, I'm making a choice to, you know, they'll say I'm making a choice, but then you ask them like, what was behind that choice to, you know, drop out of the workforce and like raise kids, and maybe they're in school now and sort of they're doing their MBAs during this like little break from their careers. But they'll say that it's because they didn't, you know, like they looked at like the income and it was like so clear that, you know, the wife was going to leave the workforce. And so they're making a choice, but at that point you're like, it's not a choice, it's just like an economic reality, right? So, but I just feel like we have to stop like fooling ourselves that it's really like an equitable situation.
So yeah, I mean, I guess my example will be more of learning from, I guess, I wouldn't say my mistakes, but so I sacrifice self-care in order to care for, when I started my PhD, my daughter was 1 year old. And so most people are like, wow, like how could you, you know, finish your PhD in 5 years with a 1-year-old? And you just do, because you have to, and because I needed to get back to work, and this was something that I wanted to do, and it was part of my dream, and there's never a great time to go back to grad school or to get your PhD or to change jobs or what have you. And so children depend on you as a parent or a single parent or whatever the situation is, and so children need to be fed, they need to be cared for, they need to be put to bed, they need to have homework done, all of those things, and then graduate school requires reading and writing and all of those things, and so at the end comes sleep, at the end comes food. And that's something that now, even though I finished my PhD in 2016, I actually really struggle now with my sleep patterns because my most productive time of day is between 11 p.m. and 4 in the morning, because that's when I write.
Undergrad hours.
Yeah, because that's when I write. So that's just, I can't get out of that cycle. So I don't know what there's to learn from that. I don't know how to do it differently. It was just, you know, prioritization, and my daughter was my first priority, and I had to do what I had to do.
I will echo that, that my children are my first priority and work is my second priority. And I've always worked, I've been fortunate enough that my husband has always, he's been a help, you know, whether he would get the kids out in the morning and I would go in early. Like I did have the luxury of being at Villanova, and my boss at the time was very understanding, and I would come in at 6:30 in the morning and I'd work till 3 because that's contractor hours. I think I talked him into that. I'm not 100% sure that was the case, but at 3 o'clock I could go home and I could meet the kids on the bus. So we had a great little gig going, and like you said, I mean, the first priority is the kids, like, because we're so, you know, as moms, I don't know if dads are the same way. I'm not sure my husband is, but I know myself. I'm always beating myself up, like, was I there? Did I do enough? Like, did I write a little note? Like, because I don't want those kids to be the ones that are like, my mom works, you know?
Cut the hearts in the tuna fish and all that,
Right. You know? And so, you know, but my children are not children anymore. They're grown men. My youngest is 25. My oldest is 31. So it can be done. And I don't think that we as a family suffered from it at all. I think my husband and I, sacrificed certain things, but I don't think our kids really were injured during that process. Matter of fact, I think they had a pretty good life, you know.
I just want to say like one thing to piggyback off that, which is like a thing that I think is really important for women to keep in mind in particular, which is that if you can make it through those like hard early years with the kids, it gets easier.
And I look at a lot of my friends who don't work, and honestly, it's hard for them now, like, you know, because when your kids are in college, you're looking for something to do for 8 hours a day. You know, you can't just shop every day, you know, you might not even have the economic, you know, wherewithal to do that. And you want to be able to take care of yourself, you know, if something happens to your spouse, your partner, whatever, you want to be able to, you know, not be destitute. So I believe in an education, I believe in, you know, a trade or whatever, but I believe in working. And I think I believe your kids need to see you working as well. That's just my own personal opinion. And I don't think that they suffered from it. I think it's just a matter of how you set up your priorities.
You're setting a strong example. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Right.
otherwise? Good? Thank you so much, everybody. This is
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank you for coming.